New Orleans, a city of mystery, a city that 1 million people proudly call home, at least the ones above ground, because New Orleans is also home to many beings that can't find their way back. Watch as our group of paranormal investigators attempt to discover these lost souls. Join us as we explore New Orleans, the most haunted city in America.
The word loup-garou is the French word to refer to a phenomenon that is known in many parts of the world. In English it's called a werewolf, and in other parts of the world it's called various things. There was this belief that people could shift shapes, could become animals, could turn themselves into animals. Either they were somehow cursed into becoming an animal, either chronically, that is, according to certain conditions, a full moon or whatever, or permanently unable to shift back into human shape without being unbewitched or having the spell broken.
We've always heard it called tatai, which a lot of times when we were misbehaving as children, the parents would tell us, behave, because if you don't, the tatai is going to get you, which for some years we didn't know what it was exactly until later on. Parents would tell us it was the equivalent of a werewolf. And sometimes this loup-garou, or loup-garou, would live in the swamps. Well, growing up in those areas, a lot of times we didn't have transportation, so we walked where we were going. As the age of about 15 or 16 years old, I'm walking to a small town to go to a party. One night, coming back, I'm crossing the highway that runs through one of the swamps. Well, as I'm walking, I see this figure emerge from one side of the highway. It was a 4-lane highway, 2 going, 2 coming. And the creature that was crossing, or the being that was crossing, took very, very little time to cross. There was a smell of, as cliche as it sounds, a wet dog, a skunk, just a very, very earthy smell. And when I got to the area where it was crossing, for me to actually cross as quick as it did, I would have to be at a fast-paced run. And this being must have been well over 6 feet tall, maybe even 7 feet tall. Staying in that area for a little while at night and seeing what I saw, I just didn't want to stick around, so I took off at a quick pace, running, trying to get back towards the town, the city lights, just so I can feel safe and secure. At that age, seeing something that you can't explain, being alone out on the highway, it really, really makes you, just want to get out of there.
My friend Richard Guidry told me a story about that he had heard as a child about a man who had been apparently turned into a dog by some circumstance, and some people were out in the woods and cooking around a fire, and this dog came bothering them, pestering them, and they were trying to shoo it away, and finally someone threw a sharp object at the dog and hit it on the nose, which caused the dog to bleed, and it turned into a man and said, "Thank you for breaking the spell. The only way I could have the spell broken was to spill some of my blood." Interesting story. And then there are a lot of stories about looking for buried treasure in Louisiana, because apparently there, sometimes these things have a grain of truth in them. There was apparently a lot of money hidden, either by pirates or by people who were trying to survive the Civil War, the raids that were associated with the Civil War. They hid their money, and sometimes they moved away or died before retrieving it. And so apparently there was this notion there was quite a bit of wealth buried in Louisiana, and there's a long-standing tradition of looking for buried treasure. And associated with that practice, there are quite a few people that I've interviewed over the years have told stories about the kinds of phenomena, supernatural phenomena, that have appeared to prevent them from finding treasure, from actually getting the treasure. that they ran across because it wasn't destined for them. Apparently, the story is that when they would bury treasure, they would ask the group, is anyone willing to stay and guard this treasure? And of course, you know, some neophyte would say, well, yeah, I will, because as soon as y'all are gone, thinking as soon as they're gone, I'll take the treasure and leave. And he would say, can I have your word on that, that you will guard this treasure? And if he said yes, they would bury the treasure and kill him, bury him over the treasure. And his spirit was condemned to guard the treasure, keeping his word.
My sister, she had a bedroom in my grandmother's house, which we happened to live in. My grandmother and grandfather had built this house. It was in the small town of Port Barre, Louisiana. Well, my sister, she had the room to herself, and on some nights she would complain about going to sleep, and she would dream about this witch coming out of an electrical panel that was in the room. And she would complain about her sitting on her chest, making fun, you know, poking at her and pulling at her clothing, and just really, really weird dreams. And it always had this witch figure. Well, after a couple of months of this happening, she, you know, told my grandmother about it. My grandmother came up with the term cauchemar, that's what it was. And she explained it was a nightmare witch.
Cauchemar, all cauchemar means is nightmare. It's a French word for nightmare. And there was, it's pronounced variantly in Louisiana, couche mal, which means to sleep poorly. Which you could see where that association would have occurred.
And she said that in the Cajun folklore, you know, usually young women who are about to have some life changes, you know, scientific life changes, coming of age, that this witch will actually try to poke and prod and torment and try to draw some type of their spirit out as an energy to claim as their own. Because the theory being that at this age, you know, you're very innocent and some changes are happening. The nightmare witch is jealous because she has no life of her own, so she tries to take from.
But a cauchemar was associated with what is in English called witch riding, which occurs when someone who's sleeping has the sensation that he's being sat on or weighed down upon, causing difficulty in breathing. Basically, all it is apnea, you know, where you have trouble breathing and you lurch out of it by taking a huge breath.
Sometimes even when she was awake after having a dream, she just felt as if it was still around, as like it was still watching her, like it was waiting for her to go to sleep. And it was just a real, sometimes hostile, you know, presence. She couldn't explain it. She thought maybe somebody was in the room with her, an actual physical person. She would get up and look around and nothing would be there. And, you know, this plagued her for quite a while, you know, at least a couple of years.
And you know, this brings up a point that a lot of times legendary references of this sort were in response to actual physiological conditions, where, you know, a lot of people felt that sensation of having, you know, being unable to breathe and sort of lurching out of it. It would wake you up in a start, and you know, oftentimes in response to actual physiological conditions like that, people came up with stories to explain what was happening.
Gradually, you know, the anxiety subsided. She no longer felt like someone was in the room. The dreams completely stopped. And there was no explanation for it. Where we lived was a very small town, very safe. So there was actually no other explanation other than what my grandmother had given, which fit exactly, which was the cauchemar, the nightmare witch.
You're watching Haunted New Orleans.
Mona Lisa legend is the New Orleans version of a classic legend known as Bloody Mary, in which slumber parties the world over have experienced going into the bathroom, turning the lights out, and standing in front of the mirror and saying, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary," and Bloody Mary is supposed to appear.
Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary.
One of the more popular legends in New Orleans history is the legend of Grunch Road. Grunch Road ran somewhere between New Orleans East and Chalmette. It was a wooded area back in the 1970s, and there were a lot of little side roads that would take you winding through the swamp to fishing areas.
It was said if you went far enough down Grunch Road, you'd come upon a strange community of people who always seemed to be nocturnal, seemed to be out in the bushes, and would follow you back and chase you out of Grunch Road back to the highway.
The Grunch was supposedly a creature that was half man and half goat. Nobody really knows how he came about or how he was created, but he supposedly ate people and tore them up in the woods as they come wandering through or driving through. He had brute strength and he was able to stop a car.
One of the earliest disappearances that I can remember in my childhood happened in relation to this area of Grunch Road. A man had gone fishing in Little Woods and was coming back from a fishing trip and had found his car on the side of the road, door open, no sight of the man.
Several days later, after his wife had filed a police report, they found his car on the side of the road with the door open and nothing but a few blood stains on it. The man's body was never found. Needless to say, secluded wooded roads made for good lovers' lanes for teenagers. So one of the more popular stories about the Grunch was about a couple that went out there to park. As the story goes, the boy got out of the car for some reason, maybe to go to the bathroom, and walked up into the woods.
Jerk.
Not returning after a while, the girl grew impatient. Nobody really knows what happened after that. They were never found again.